bespoke props and costumes and weapons, and then you walk onto the sets.
Yeah.
And the sets are just the most spectacular sets. I mean, we had, city blocks worth of sets with a working harbor. We had, we have a whole village built. We have, and season 2, I can't say anything about season 2, but it's
more.
more.
It's more.
It's more.
Yeah.
I mean, it was spectacular.
Welcome back to No Set Path. I'm your host, Drew English. If this is your first time joining us, thank you so much for being here. If I've timed this right, this episode should be rolling out just ahead of the release of Season 2 of The Rings of Power on Amazon Prime, which is perfect because my guest this week is Alex Disenhof ASC. He was the primary cinematographer for Season 2 of the show. We had him here in studio, had a great casual chat about all things filmmaking, work-life balance, the return to Middle-earth. He's such a good dude, a real joy to talk to, so I can't wait to get into it. Without further delay, here is my interview with Alex Disenhof, ASC. So I'm not really sure where to start all this, but I guess the easy softball question is what got you into filmmaking, or what started the bug?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thanks for having me. It's cool to be here. It's cool to walk from my house. I just walked from my house to be here.
I walked here.
Pretty
it's
sweet.
Great. It's amazing.
Yeah, so I started really young. I was probably 6 or 7 years old when my grandfather was an amateur photographer. He had a darkroom in his basement. And my uncle's a photographer, again, amateur photographer, but really into it. And so I was always around it, or image making. And so I started shooting photos as I got into kind of my early adolescent and into teenage years. I started making, home movies, started shooting my friends skateboarding and rollerblading and biking and snowboarding, all those things. Just always had a camera, shooting my friends' bands. And my high school teacher, we had a TV class in high school, and we actually had a little studio and some cameras, multicam stuff, and then also just like handy cams. We had some the Final Cut, one of the early Final Cut, suites.
Yeah.
And my high school teacher who ran the class said, "You're going to be a cinematographer one day." After kind of being with me for a year, I didn't know what that was. I was devastated because I was like, I want to be a director.
Oh, yeah. But it was the premonition.
I didn't know. Well, and I also didn't know the difference, right?
Sure.
I didn't, at that point in my life, I was probably 15. That was a new word for me.
Yeah.
But that's what started that kind of, that bug, that track for me. I started paying attention to who was shooting movies, who the cinematographer was on set. And so by the time college rolled around, I had a one-track mind. I applied to one school, applied to Emerson College in Boston. I grew up 30 minutes north of Boston. So,
where'd you grow up?
Salem, New Hampshire.
Yeah. I went to school in Lowell, so.
Oh,
yeah.
I was born in Lowell. So there you
Perfect.
go. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
yeah. Okay, so you know that area.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I applied to one school, early application, got in. I knew right away.
Yeah.
And when I got onto my first student film set, I saw the cinematographer, and I said, "Oh yeah, my teacher was right. That's the job I want." I like the idea that they're holding the camera. They're using my first discovery of lighting, like actual using lights to tell stories and not just to expose an image, but actually to create an atmosphere. It was a moment I'll never forget, actually, of just like that realization that this was what I'm supposed to do.
It's interesting. I went through something similar with music because I was all in on music. Like I was obsessed. Like that's all I wanted to do. And I wanted to be the guy who made all the scores for the film. So once I kind of put that together, I would just dweeb out on score. And I remember, it's funny that you actually worked on a Lord of the Rings project, which we'll get to. But when I watched the original trilogy, right? When they started coming out with like the extended like DVD box sets, and I got like the Fellowship of the Ring box set, and I would just find all the stuff on music, anything on music, I would just like binge that over and over and over.
Yeah.
So I understand what it's like to get bit by that bug. And it's great that you've like seen it through to like the most top level that you possibly can, because it doesn't happen for everybody. I mean,
no, I mean, I've been so fortunate. You know, I really like it is. I do pinch myself sometimes, because even though it can be a hard life, you know, especially as somebody who has a family, and the unpredictable nature of what we do, it certainly can add an element of stress to one's life. But at the same time, I mean, I am doing exactly what I hoped I would be doing, and really never thought it would happen the way it did. You never really know. But no, I mean, even just going back to what you just said about the Lord of the Rings box sets, you know, those came out in such a formative time for me.
Yeah.
I was in high school, and I remember the moment sitting in the theater in The Return of the King and saying, whoa, this is amazing. This is definitely something I want to do. You know, and then getting those DVDs and watching all the behind the scenes. And so then to get a call to go and kind of go back to Middle Earth as a cinematographer was just beyond.
Isn't it weird? It's like, I don't know if you have this experience, and maybe it's because I spend maybe a little too much time online. It's like, holy shit. Like all these people who are doing like substantial things, I can't think of a single one of them off the top of my head, but it's like to think of how those projects and those past films have like inspired like a generation of people. I know like people went through that with like Jurassic Park, and you know, they've turned into like big filmmakers or whatever. It's really interesting. Okay, so film school. I actually have a bunch of friends that I've met in our business that have gone to Emerson.
It was a great experience. Made some amazing friends. Just got a great education in terms of being on set every weekend.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't have classes on Fridays, so it would be Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I was on set every weekend of every year. You know, and there's some amazing filmmakers. You know, the Daniels just won 8 Oscars. They were at Emerson at the same time I was.
Oh,
you
man.
know, their DP, another DP. There's so many really interesting filmmakers who kind of came up together. And I think the reason why I liked Emerson too at the time, and this isn't like a paid advertisement, but it wasn't competitive. Like NYU, I remember going to NYU and touring, and it felt very competitive. Whereas Emerson felt like a community, and it really was. So I went out to LA my senior year. You know, Emerson connects you with these different companies. I ended up at Partizan, which
oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, they do commercials and music videos, and Michel Gondry, the French filmmaker who did Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Great movie.
It's his. Yeah, it's his company. He was the co-founder.
Oh, that I didn't know. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
So through that, I got to know him. I also, you know, so I was doing everything from filing paperwork to, you know, just being just the runner, bring checks to the bank, whatever.
Yeah.
But to me, it was like, wow, I'm in the business. I'm in Hollywood.
Cool,
you know, it's amazing. And I was also shooting what I could on the side. So I had done a music video in college that I had been nominated at Camera Image for. That was my first thing I did. Which was pretty crazy.
Dude, that's wild.
Yeah. So
for people listening who don't know, or maybe don't know, Camera Image is a film festival that like specifically celebrates cinematography.
Yeah.
And that it's like a huge honor to have something there, and to have it when you're in college is like.
It was my first thing I had ever shot, which
crazy.
is pretty crazy.
That's super crazy.
And so that was a whole different experience, getting flown out there and having one thing on my reel was kind of funny. But so I had that, and then I did a little tiny movie with my friends who are still some of my best friends. I think we made the whole thing for $120,000, but it went to South by Southwest.
Nice. What movie?
It's called Funeral Kings. It's great. It's a fun little dark comedy starring like 3 teenage altar boys. It's really funny. But you know, we did it for nothing. It was a bunch of friends from Emerson actually. Yeah. And so I was doing those things, and I was interning for Michel and his company, and that kind of one thing led to another. I started shooting some small music videos for him on a Bolex or running around LA. And eventually he had this little movie For him, it was a little movie. It was like $3 million with all real teenagers from the Bronx. They were part of this arts program, and it was going to be shot in a very documentary style on a moving city bus all around the Bronx. And he was looking for a collaborator who could kind of relate to these kids a little bit better. You know, he was a middle-aged Frenchman.
Yeah.
These kids were all like 15, 16. And his producer said, well, maybe you should hire Alex for this movie because he's basically their age. I was 24 at the time.
Yeah.
Long story short, he did. We made the movie. It was really difficult, but really rewarding. I learned a lot. And it opened the Director's Fortnight at the Cannes Film Festival when I was 25. And so that was my second movie. And that was kind of what led me to become a full-time narrative DP. And I joined the union, and I got my first agent and all that stuff. So I was quite young, and I was very fortunate to get the opportunities that I got.
I'm still kind of blown away by like the age you were at when all this stuff started happening. Because when I was 25, I didn't know shit. You know?
Again, I mean, I was fortunate. I think the biggest advantage I had was that I knew what I wanted from a very early age.
Fair enough.
You know, I was a teenager when I really set my sights on cinematography. I'll also understand that that's unusual. Most people don't have that kind of flash of inspiration where they feel like they know what they want. So I don't take that for granted. And then the fact that things happen so quickly for me was a lot of right place, right time. I mean, I worked my butt off, of course. I think you have to, but I, again, don't take for granted the fact that, you know, none of the people who took the risk of asking me to do something with them had to do that. You know, I was so young, and I didn't know a lot, but they saw something. I don't know if it was just the willingness to kind of, you know, bust my ass or what. But they took a lot of risks, and you know, I wasn't strategic, especially at the beginning. There was no strategy. There was just like, I got to shoot everything I can.
Yeah.
You know, once I started, you know, once I kind of got my foot in the door, and once I had this, you know, these films that had been at these major festivals, and my agent, then I started to be more strategic, and that also is a different whole thing, which I actually think I managed pretty well. Again, you never really know. You know, you never know if a project is. There's like only one or two times in my whole life where I'm like, this is definitely going to be awesome.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You hope, but you know, making a film, it's a miracle that any film gets made ever.
You're not the first person to say that.
And and you know, you're at the mercy of a lot of people. It's community art making, so many things. You can have all the great ingredients, but if you know, they might just not mix together well. Whatever you know. So again, you know, you can do your best to be strategic about picking your projects, but sometimes you just again have to be pretty lucky.
So there's this concept of like, and this is not an original me phrase, something I picked up somewhere else, but like luck surface area, where it's like, you know, you increase your luck by just like doing the thing that you're trying to do and creating more opportunity for yourself.
Yeah.
It speaks to the idea of like just doing what you're doing because you want to be doing it, or because that's the craft you want to focus on, instead of like, there's a time and place for strategy. I totally agree with that. But it's not necessarily in the creative process all the time. Like it's hard to, as you say, know in your world, is this film or this show going to be the thing that like, you know, levels me up to the next place I want to go or whatever. And it's, if you go into projects and like your craft thinking that way, it's really probably not the best, best position to put yourself in.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, you have to just do what speaks. I mean, when you're first starting, you just do whatever you can because the more you do something, the better you get at it. And then if you have traction and you get to be more selective, it's really about being selective about what you think would, you know, fulfill your creative soul.
Did you, you know, I know you mentioned you really worked your butt off to get to, you know, get to a position where you were like able to pick up some of the lower hanging fruit from Michel's company and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I guess my question is, how methodical were you with your training, or did you just kind of have a natural like inclination to shooting, and you just took that natural ability coupled with, you know, whether it's like rapport building or just like other people skills you have, and like parlay that into getting your career off the ground? I guess it's a really long-winded way of asking, do you have any like self-assessment? Like what's your unfair advantage? Is it a technical?
Right.
Is it a relationship building thing? Like what's your unfair advantage other than right place, right time, and all the luck stuff that goes into a lot of creative process? I'm just curious.
Sure. Oh, it's a great question. I don't consider myself a very technical person. When I was beginning, I mean, I am interested in the technical craftsman. Like I'm interested in the technical stuff in the service of our craft and of our storytelling. I like to know what's out there because I like to know how I can use it to tell a story. I'm not somebody who loves to like dive really deep into, you know, resolution or, you know, the very latest little gadget or whatever.
Totally.
And at the beginning of my career, I had a lot more free time, and I certainly did try my best to kind of read up as much as I could, watch films as much as I could, and try to harness the technical, because I was a bit worried about it, to be honest, because I wouldn't consider myself a very technical person. So that I knew was kind of my maybe my weak point. So I did overcompensate a little bit. That said, I don't think you can't really learn it until you do it, right? There's something, maybe some people can and just read it in a book and remember. For me, I have to just get my hands on it. I'm a visual learner.
Yeah, man. Trial by fire. You just got to get out there and do it.
Yeah, and also you try to work with people who know better than you, and that's how you learn. So I try to hire a really good crew who, especially early in my career, most of my crew had more experience than I did, and they kind of helped me along, you know. And I would have the idea. Might not be able to execute the idea technically, but I would say, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to do it. Okay, now tell me how I should do it. You know, and that was kind of this process. And then in terms of I think the thing that maybe has helped me along the way is I've tried to be the nicest person you can work with. I really think that's super important. I try to be good to work with for the producers, for my crew, for the actors, the director, obviously. Like I really want to be amenable in every way, because ultimately we spend so much time with these people. And I'm not the most talented person out there. I know there's so many incredible artists, but at the end of the day, it's a relationship business. And if someone is thinking about hiring two cinematographers, one's really talented, but maybe has a reputation for being difficult, and one is talented, but is also a guy who everyone wants to work with on a day-to-day basis. Nowadays, at least, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago it was different, but nowadays people want to work with people who are nice.
If you put a person that has like a big ego in that chair, it doesn't necessarily do any favors for the whole vibe of the crew.
Yeah.
You know, I think you and I are similarly disposed in the sense that like I said, I'm not the most technical person. And oftentimes I'll be put in the DP seat with people who are more experienced than me in whatever camera we're using or whatever. It took me a little while to kind of get out of the imposter syndrome head with that and just accept the fact that it's like, well, when you're in that seat, you're kind of more of a manager, like a creative manager, creative directing the camera department. It's like, if you're good at talking to people and having creative oversight and having creative ideas and passing it off to people you trust to like execute, it's like...
And being organized.
Organized.
You know, I mean...
It's like half the battle.
Oh, yeah. And as the projects get bigger, it's so much about people management and politics and the things that you don't learn. You just, you can learn some of it, but ultimately you have to just, I think some people are naturally a bit better at it than others. But I think the one thing everyone can do is think about how they're coming off and how they're treating other people. I think it's the number one thing. And that's to say, you're not necessarily giving up your creative, it's not that you don't stick to your guns creatively and you don't speak up and say, this is what I believe in, and you can be strong, and you can have strong ideas, and you can have, you can defend your ideas willfully.
Yeah.
But I think with the understanding that it's a community of people coming together to make something, it's not just about you. I think it really is. I think that if there's one thing that has helped me continue to get work, it's that,
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And, just personally, I get it. Hearing you say that, I totally get it, especially knowing you a little bit more. Like when we first met, we met this past summer at like a filmmaker hangout. I'm like, pretty sure I think that's Alex Disenhof. I'm going to go say hi. And it's like, you just make yourself super approachable and like super down to earth. Which is great, which is like, if that's who you are, then that's how you should be. And that like translates really well to being on set. So my question, I'll frame it in like the most practical way possible, is like, what was the job that you remember being the first job where you walk on the set, you're like, there's no way I should be here as the DP of this film or show or whatever. It's like, they're going to find out that I don't know what I'm talking about. Like whatever goes through your head, it's like, I always think about reading somewhere, Roger Deakins, like the first day on any film, he like keeps his eye buried in the eyepiece most of the day because he's like, doesn't want people to find out he doesn't know what he's doing. Right. It's Roger Deakins. It's fine. Like everybody has their process. Yeah. But like, do you remember a specific time being like, oh yeah, this is going to be weird?
Yeah. It's funny. Okay, so to back up a little bit, I think I suffered from imposter syndrome for the first 5 or 6 years pretty severely. I was in therapy at the time, and I would tell my therapist, like, I'm not, like, I don't feel comfortable calling myself a DP. And this is after I had a film at Cannes. I had a film at South by Southwest. I had been nominated at Camera Image.
I hate to break it to you, man. I haven't had any of those things. I still call myself a DP.
Well, and I remember my therapist was like, he's like, well, how do you make money? I'm like, well, I'm a cinematographer. Yeah. It's like, you can call yourself a cinematographer. You are. But, there's this feeling that you have. You're like, yeah, but,
Totally. I get it.
And I had that for a long time. Although when I walk onto set, I don't feel that, which is,
that's cool.
I feel very, I think it's because I have confidence in my ideas, even if it's not a good idea, maybe. But I always feel there's something about being on set and being with other people and bouncing ideas around that I feel comfortable with, and I've always just naturally felt comfortable with. So it's funny. I think during the prep process, I feel like, oh God, I don't know. But once it's like boots hit the ground, I feel a little bit more comfortable. And then I think the thing that kind of broke me out of the imposter syndrome was I did this movie called Fishing Without Nets, which is a Somali pirate movie from the perspective of the pirates.
Oh, interesting.
And that was my next project really after Michel's movie. Yeah. And that was one I knew was going to be really difficult, but really special. We shot in Kenya for 77 days on a $3 million budget. But it was amazing experience. It won the directing award at Sundance. It was the thing that, it changed a lot for me because of how difficult it was. I finally kind of felt like there was no choice but to be confident and to kind of just go for it. Yeah. And then when it came out and it did well and people were responding to it in a way that I think we all hoped they would, that confirmed to me that, okay, maybe I am doing some of the right things, And then that was actually the job that got me my first big studio gig, and so I was like 28 by then.
Yeah.
And went into the studio world, and then my first pilot I did in the studio world, I was nominated for an ASC award. So that
What pilot was that?
it was for The Exorcist.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that again, like that was kind of confirmation. So moving up into that world, being like, they were like, "Who's this kid?" The studio didn't really want to hire me, but again, the filmmaker Rupert Wyatt, he took a chance on me. He changed my whole life, because he took me out of the indie world. He plucked me out and put me in the studio world when the studio was like, "I don't know if we want to hire this guy," but Rupert was like, "You have to."
Yeah.
And they did. I again just kind of did what I always do, which is I worked my butt off. I was receptive to ideas. Like, I feel very lucky to have gotten to this place in my life where I feel comfortable calling myself a cinematographer, and feeling like confident in that. And the doubt creeps in other ways, but not in that way,
Right.
So yeah, and it's an ever evolving process of like, having a family and starting having a young child, and my relationship to my work is different now than it was
100%.
2 years ago before
100%.
I had a son, and I think that's something I'm sure that will continually evolve, and for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, I mean, look, you're the man to ask, because anybody, like, I've gone through it, and I think we all kind of go. It's a continual process, right? I don't think it ever stops when you talk about work-life balance, having a family, especially with what we do. But you're kind of at the extreme end where your jobs are months and months, sometimes a year.
Yeah.
It depends on the context and the setting. But it's like, how have you found? What's the evolution been like when you knew you wanted to like get married, start a family, kind of do that, and how that would relate to what you do as a career? Because I mean, and you've seen it and I've seen it. It's like personal relationships, like marriages, a lot of times end in divorce, and there's like a lot of broken families because the industry is hard, because a lot of times you're away from home. And I know we've talked outside of this where it's like you're fortunate that you can at this stage travel with your family and you have a good setup.
Yeah.
But like kind of outside of that specifically, more like big picture, like how do you handle the work-life balance when the career is so demanding?
Yeah.
But every time I've run into you on the street, it's like half the time you're with your wife and kid, and like,
Well, I think, I mean, it's not a fit. We're not in a fair business, and I think most industries that are super competitive and demanding, they're not fair to the partners.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it just isn't.
Yeah.
So I think it's like acknowledging the first step is acknowledging that, because I think something that my wife and I have worked on for many years is like making sure, and it's not a perfect thing, right? It's always like, again, evolving and checking in with each other, but it always like making sure that we both know that this isn't fair, and that I'm acknowledging her the work and sacrifices she puts in to allow me to pursue my dreams, right?
Yeah.
I'm in a fortunate situation where my wife can still work and travel, so she can kind of pursue her things as well, which I know not everybody has.
Sure.
But that doesn't diminish the difficulty of the hours that we have, and that when I'm working, I'm pretty much, even if she's with me and even if my son's with me, I'm an absent.
Yeah, you're inaccessible.
Person. I'm just so buried in the work, especially in America. It's much worse over here than it. Like, I've just did a bunch of years in England and New Zealand, and it was much better.
I've heard
it's somewhat it's a world of difference, but particularly in America, it's a cultural thing to basically work till we drop.
Yeah.
And it's I don't think I have a perfect answer, because I don't think it's a perfect situation for anybody, but I think it's about just when you do have the time, making sure you have quality time and that you make it your job. Like I'm the primary caregiver to my son right now while I'm off because I let my wife work and she's writing a book. So it's like
Cool.
she writes her book during the day into the evening. We have our nanny, but I also I wake up with my son and get him breakfast and I put him to bed at night.
Yeah.
I do all the things I know that I can't do when I'm working.
Yeah.
And so just making sure that there's some sort of equal balance when I can.
Yeah, man. I mean, well, that's the answer.
Yeah.
And the answer is just recognizing that it's not perfect and always trying to do your best or do better.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I totally feel that 100%. And, I think for me, fatherhood has really put things in perspective in a really positive way.
Same.
And it gives
100%.
you a very realistic approach to work and career because, now you have a career as a cinematographer that myself and others would be easily jealous of in terms of the work, right?
Yeah.
But when push comes to shove, it's we're the same. At the end of the day, no matter what I'm doing, it's I want to pick up my kid and play with her and whatever.
100%.
And I think it really puts it in perspective. And I do love the answer of there is no answer, but just knowing that it's not perfect is enough because it's a constant
it goes a long way.
Balance. Yeah.
And I think if your partner knows you're making the effort of and you're understanding that the situation is not great because of your work, I think that goes a long way to kind of feeling like you're on the same team. And then I also would say this, some people, the jealousy thing and all this, I think everyone feels that no matter how high up on the mountain you are, because there's always going to be someone better. There's always going to be someone doing whatever, So I think that having a kid has really helped me in that respect, because you just remember at the end of the day, what's actually important. Oh man, I didn't get the thing I really wanted to get, but you know what? When I walk through that door, this little kid is running up and just yelling my name and so happy, and you remember. It's so cliche to say it. Everyone says it, but it's because it's true.
It's totally true.
And I think that's something that's been great, and it's healthy because it allows you to kind of check yourself a little bit. You're like, well, look how lucky I am. I have this beautiful person who loves me.
Totally. But this is kind of at the crux of why I want to have these conversations. It's because, someone who doesn't know someone like you in your position can make a lot of assumptions or just, but it's when you're able to have a conversation, just be at the end of the day, we're all just dads or moms or whatever. Yeah, it's so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Parenthood's a wild ride. I was having beers last night with another filmmaker buddy over at Rough Draft, and we hadn't caught up in a while. And there was some kid having a meltdown, just a tantrum. And he was all wigged out. He looks over at me. He's like, "This is nothing to you, right?" It's I'm it rolls right off my back. Kids screaming, that's fine. Yeah, whatever, no big deal.
Oh yeah, you learn to laugh because you're just they're so irrational and ridiculous. No, you're just I mean, it is what it is. Sometimes you want to jump off a building.
Oh yeah,
but for the most part, it's just it's great and it's funny and it's and they are funny and so that's a whole nother
I mean,
avenue
for anybody listening who is not a parent or considering parenthood, you can't make it up. It's every time you get right up to the point where you're ready to lose your mind, your absolute breaking point, and then your kid will do something where you're like, well, this is fine. Yeah. Everything's great. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Too funny.
It's the wildest ride of all, and
literally.
Forget about filmmaking.
Literally.
It's the wildest ride of all.
So I'm curious how the ASC thing happened, because am I right in saying you're still the youngest member of the ASC?
Yeah.
Look at you.
So yeah.
It's American Society of Cinematographers, if people don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it goes without saying, anyone who knows the cinematography world, it is kind of the ultimate honor to be able to be a part of this society. I was not something I was not expecting, especially at the age I was at when I got in. I was hoping maybe someday when I was, 40s or 50s or whatever, I'd maybe would have compiled a body of work, that would, be good enough to join. But I did a project. I was nominated for an ASC award, which kind of put me on the radar of some of the cinematographers in the ASC. And then it just happened one day where a member, James Whitaker, who's an incredible cinematographer, he approached me and was like, why aren't you in? You've been nominated. And I was like, I don't know. I don't really know how it works. And
how do I answer that?
But he was so kind, and he kind of spearheaded this effort to have other members write me letters of recommendation. And I went through the whole process. It's a very in-depth process. And was fortunate enough to be accepted in, and it's been, it's hard to put into words. Someone who's been reading the magazine since they were 18, knowing that there's only been like 900 something members since 1918,
something like that.
To be a part of that legacy is really something I don't take lightly. It's amazing, and I think as a young filmmaker still, I think that having those letters after my name, they don't necessarily get you jobs or anything like that, but what they do is they get you access to other filmmakers who might not take you seriously otherwise. If I email...
It's like putting PhD at the end of something.
Like I've emailed some of my heroes asking a question or, whatever, and I think that if it was just Joe Schmo, they may not know it to take it seriously, but if it's Joe Schmo ASC, all of a sudden they're like, okay, we're part of the same fraternity, we're part of the same, family. We understand that this is I'm somebody who has had some sort of legitimacy in my career. So yeah, I mean, there's so many. It's surreal. I mean, it's surreal still. I mean, it's certainly surreal, but it's an amazing organization that. Their focus on education and continuing the craft and kind of pushing the craft, and then also preserving our history is really special and really important, and sits in a unique place in the film industry because it is I believe it's the oldest of all of those, of kind of all the I don't know what you call them, clubs.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like, and maybe I'm not thinking through this enough, but just right off the top, it feels like there's not a lot that's protected in the film industry. Having something like the ASC that I don't think a lot of other legs of the film industry have is it kind of offers this like preservation, like you said, preserving that side of the craft, which I don't necessarily think exists in a lot of ways, though I may not be correct in that thinking.
No, I think you're right. I mean, there are there's other branches of filmmaking that have their own unique groups, but what makes the ASC special is that it's really focused on education and passing down kind of the legacy of cinematography from one generation to the next generation. It's once you get in, you really understand how important that is to the society. I mean, and I think we all know as filmmakers, like the magazine has been the Bible for so many filmmakers, not just cinematographers, but directors, editors, actors.
Shows up at my door every month.
I mean, and that is the legacy of education and of, kind of peeling back the cover on how people make movies. And there's, you go back in the archives and it's incredible. It's an incredible resource because you see how people made movies, 70 years ago, 80 years ago, 90 years ago. I mean, they celebrated their 100th year recently. I mean, and there's nothing like that in the film business. And I think it's really important. And so, to be a part of it is something that I'm really grateful for. And I I like being able to participate in it as well and really help, add some constructive whatever I can do to help.
Yeah,
it
do your
along,
part. How did Rings of Power like happen? Because I think to like kind of circle back to the beginning where we were talking about inspiration and influence and like those Lord of the Rings box sets, and now to like skip ahead a whole bunch of years and now be working on this next incarnation of the Lord of the Rings world.
Yeah.
How did that happen, and what did it feel like to be a part of that? And this is mostly for my own inner dweeb as well as people listening,
No, I mean, it's I ask myself that all the time. How did that happen? Because I don't really know, but I'll say this. I'd only done one, that's not true. I'd done 2 jobs in my life where I wasn't the kind of first DP in, right? I usually try to do, start on the ground floor with pilots and do movies. I think any cinematographer would like to be the person on the ground floor.
Yeah, of course.
I've done it in certain circumstances where I haven't been because of other outside forces, but opportunities have come up that were interesting, which is, Watchmen.
Yeah.
I wasn't, but it was, again, I had another job I had fallen through. I was like, oh man, I need to work. I just bought a house in LA, and it came along, and it was Watchmen. It was this very special project.
Yeah.
And then I had done another show called Legion, which again was really interesting. But I was still very hesitant about like, oh, I'm not the first DP on the ground. I don't want to do those kinds of jobs if I can avoid it.
Yeah. Like come in and have to like fill somebody else's shoes or replicate what they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. And but then, so I was doing a show called The Mosquito Coast, which I did the pilot for. I did the first few episodes for. I was in Mexico. I remember it was like a Saturday, and I was walking around this little city in Mexico, and I got a phone call, and it's the producers of The Lord of the Rings, and they just were, hey, we want to meet with you. I still don't know how they got it. No idea. But as someone I am a
maybe
huge
it's better you don't know.
No,
by the way.
I never asked.
Yeah.
I've been. This was 2019.
Well, you're too far down the road now. You can never ask.
Yeah. So 2019. So it's like almost 4 years or almost 5 years ago. I don't want to know. But whatever it was great because I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I'm a huge Tolkien fan. Those movies made such a difference in my life. And so it was not even a question. It was like, if I don't care if I'm the 19th DP in for this.
Yeah.
But what it was they said, hey, we have this chunk of 2 episodes of the first season, and they kind of go together, and we want a director and a DP to come in and shoot them like a big movie. And they're the apex of the first season, and it's the craziest thing you'll ever read in your life. You can't read it though until you come to New Zealand. And I just was like, whatever, man, sign me up. I'm in. And so I had one other meeting with them, but it wasn't, there was no real, I wasn't competing. There was no interview process. I wasn't competing against other people as far as I knew. It was just kind of they called me up. I think they made sure I wasn't insane. And then
okay, he's not crazy. He's got the job.
Yeah. And then COVID hit, and then it became all very scary about whether it was actually going to happen. Was that just a dream? And about a year later, I left for New Zealand. It was the January 2021. So my wife and I left for New Zealand with our dogs for 7 months or 8 months or whatever it was, and we hit the ground running there, and it was the most incredible experience of my life. Still, I mean, it as someone who's a movie fan and as a Lord of the Rings fan, to walk around just the workshops that they have.
Yeah, man.
And seeing the artisans, the chainmail makers and the blacksmiths. And
that's the thing that gets me. Is
unbelievable.
Because they were still working the Weta, right?
Yeah, we have Weta workshops, and I'm telling you, we had a leather shop.
Dude, I remember watching on the original
DVDs.
trilogy, the DVDs.
Yeah.
and they talk about the costumes, and it's
Oh,
like they
yeah.
show you like the detail and the thing that you never see.
Yeah.
But it's like felt not seen
Exactly.
kind of thing. And it's just like the world building and the creation of this like
and that's
space.
what this was. So
So
it
cool.
was one of the most kind of amazing days of my career was just walking, never mind shooting, but just walking around and getting introduced to all the artisans and seeing the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who are crafting these, bespoke props and costumes and weapons, and then you walk onto the sets.
Yeah.
And the sets are just the most spectacular sets. I mean, we had, city blocks worth of sets with a working harbor. We had, we have a whole village built. We have, and season 2, I can't say anything about season 2, but it's
more.
even more.
It's more.
It's more.
Yeah.
I mean, it was spectacular. And
So cool.
so to be able to walk onto those sets and to be in Middle Earth again was truly like an incredible experience.
But like this is part of the why, right? Because it's like we could talk about like career, blah blah blah, till we're blue in the face. But like I'm like I get like little tingles where I'm like, dude, you got to see the thing.
Yeah,
you got to be in the place, and at some point,
yeah,
it's like your inner kid takes over, and it's not about the cameras or the lights or the epic filmmaking achievements. It's just about like finding that like voice that's your inner kid and just like leaning into it, which is so cool. It's so cool.
I mean, truly, that's what it was. And to be able to kind of pinch yourself and say, this is, in a million years, I wouldn't have dreamed that I could be doing this, because this is what, 16-year-old Alex wanted. I could go on. It was a very special experience, very unique experience, and something that I'll always have. Like I'll always be able to take with me, because it's just
that's so great.
The stars align in a very special way.
I love all of that. Not only like being able to like come full circle on like childhood dreams, but also just like it's so cool for you to be like, oh, it would be great if I could work on something like this, but I'm not at a place where I can. And then it's like literally just a few years later, like
get the
things
call.
have merged, like the lines have intersected.
Yeah.
That's so dope.
Yeah.
And so somewhere in there, you left LA and moved to the Hudson Valley in New York.
Yeah.
What was that all about? Just looking for a change?
Just looking for a change. You know, okay, well, let's, I mean, the deep dive into it is, I've been very fortunate in my life and my career to kind of achieve a lot of the things that I wanted to, that I dreamed of doing earlier than I maybe thought would, if at all, if they would ever happen. Which allowed me to have a bit more freedom in my choices in my personal life. So, I was in LA for 11 years. I love LA in many ways. I have my best friends in the world live in LA still. But I met my now wife. She didn't like LA. I'm from the East Coast. And I also really wanted to start a family. And I felt like, well, I'm never here. I'm never working here. I mean, I think I shot 2 narrative jobs in LA in 11 years. So, I was always somewhere else. I didn't necessarily want to raise a child in LA.
Fair enough.
Just didn't feel like the place.
That's why we left New York, because we want to start a family and not do the city thing.
And we knew, my wife and I knew that the life that we live, because of my work, it's a circus life, right? And so we'll only have a certain amount of time to kind of rest and lay our heads somewhere. Let's find somewhere we love, that's peaceful, that fits more of what we picture our life wanting to be in a domestic sense. And we had some friends in this area. We'd come visit. We loved the area. And then when we found our house on Zillow one day, and we were like, that place is awesome. Like, let's just go look. And we had already had an engagement on the East Coast. We had to go to anyway for some family stuff. We stopped over here. Like, okay, this sounds awesome. And so we just kind of went for it. And it's been the best decision in my personal life that I think or, outside of, meeting and marrying my wife. But, it's like, it's such an important decision and something that it's one of the best decisions I've ever made. I love it here because it still has culture and interesting people. I mean, here we are, two filmmakers talking about stuff in your podcast studio on the street that I live on.
Totally.
Feeling like I wasn't giving up my, this. I was nervous leaving LA for a more rural place, thinking, "Oh, am I going to miss the culture?" Right? But this is not that. This does not have that problem here. We are still in the kind of New York City
sphere,
and
zone of influence.
So you have a lot of really interesting people and artists and restaurants, and it is much more conducive to our peace in our life.
Well, again, I think it's all about perspective and gaining perspective for yourself. I always get in this trap of oh, if I'm not in the place with the people, then I'm going to have a harder time doing the thing.
Right.
And, fill in the blanks as you will.
Yeah.
But, I think it's really about gaining that perspective and moving out of the city. I was also nervous.
Yeah.
For a different reason. I was I built my whole filmmaking career in New York, don't know anything else. So it's I'm never going to work another day in my life if I move out of the city. Obviously that wasn't true.
Right.
And it's been very, there's been a lot of self-realization that's happened, kind of plucking myself out of that scene, out of the scene, right? And putting myself in a different spot. Now, granted, we're, in two different spots.
Yeah.
I'm not doing I'm not traveling all over the world to shoot at this stage. But, I think the sentiment is similar where it's it's done a lot for personal growth and for family growth and to make me feel like a well-adjusted adult man.
Yeah. Well, you realize, I think too, as you get older and you have a family, you realize more and more that life isn't just your career. I think, again, it's super cliche to say it, but it's true. And I think, when you're in your 20s, it's a great thing to be able to focus on your career and be super selfish. And because you want to get, and you want to launch yourself in the world. And it's a very hard business to kind of have a career in.
Oh yeah.
I was fortunate enough to kind of have this engine behind my career early enough where I felt like I didn't need to be in LA anymore.
Yeah.
That, it wasn't going to lose anything. Am I a little bit bummed out that I got into ASC right after I left and so now I can't just hang out at the clubhouse all the time in Hollywood? Sure. But, it's okay because there's a million advantages of being where I'm here. And I've created a great group of friends here and our son loves it here. And it's kind of a dream up here. So I think especially nowadays, the modern world that we're in, how much of it's remote and how much, once you start to ask around to, here's the other kind of thing people don't realize, I think there's a lot of really big famous filmmakers that you all know out there that don't live in LA or New York.
Absolutely.
But I think people don't quite understand because they don't advertise it, which I think it's fine.
It's fine, yeah.
But more people than people realize actually don't live in a major hub. And maybe they started there, but they left. Because,
and also I think, and I've probably said this before on another episode, but I think it's a really beautiful place to be if there's any kind of positive connotation that came out of COVID is that, the being anywhere is more accepted now.
100%.
It's where are you? Yeah. Okay, cool. No big deal.
No
it's you don't have to be in a hub, or hanging out in the scene.
No.
As long as you're doing the work you want to be doing and you're making enough noise to get the jobs you want to get. If you're talking about what we do or any creative career, really, it's you can be anywhere.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
It is.
Which is totally great.
Yeah. I mean, I think if I were to tell a young filmmaker who's just starting, who wants to make, to be in the Hollywood system, I would say, okay, you should go to LA, you should go to New York, you should go to one of those places and get your foot in the door there because it is easier and for sure. But don't feel constrained to staying there because ultimately, if people like working with you, they're going to want to work with you.
And you get to a point where no matter what your setup is, no matter what your situation is, I mean, you get to a point where you kind of know where you're like, okay, I'm ready to go, try something new. And, are there nerves that surround that? Totally.
For sure.
But you figure it out.
Yeah.
What's next for you that you can talk about?
I'm doing a 7-episode miniseries for HBO called Task. And it's from the same creator as the guy who wrote Mayor of Easttown. And it's great story, great scripts. So I'm really excited for that. So I've officially already started, and I'll hit the ground on our location right at the beginning of the next year.
Cool, dude.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're an easy man to find online, but if you wanted to send people one place, where would you send them?
Ooh, that's a good question. Probably, if people want to talk to me, it would be my Instagram.
Yeah.
So that's Alex Disenhof _ASC.
Got to put that
That's
ASC on there.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I mean, a little self promotion.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what everyone pretends that Instagram's not for self promotion, but
that's all
it is, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, let's be real.
I mean, it's fine.
It's that's a whole nother. I'll say one thing about social media in general.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I didn't have that when I was starting out.
Oh yeah, it's awful.
I think Instagram was kind of out there, but it wasn't a thing.
Not to where it is now.
And so I didn't have it. I didn't have social media till I was like probably late 20s.
Yeah.
And I feel bad I think it's a very unhealthy place to be because of how it makes you compare yourself to others.
Yeah. I was going to say, especially if you're talking about like self-worth or
yeah. And I think
whatever.
Self-worth is a hard thing to come by in this business as it is. And especially when you're young.
Yeah.
And I don't think so just everyone out there who's on social media, remember, it's all lies.
It's all lies. It's all smoke and mirrors.
It's all a bunch of bullshit. Everyone
message Alex and then immediately get off Instagram.
Yeah, exactly. No, we could talk if you need, but I honestly think it's like you just have to remember that like everyone has their own shit they're going through. Everyone, no matter what, again, you could be the very top of the mountain, and it's always still a process, and it's not. I think being jealous is a waste of time. So
it's a good spot to end it, dude. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course,
really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody, that was my interview with Alex Disenhof. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I'll be sure to put at least a link to his Instagram account in the show notes for this episode, but all you need to do is look him up on IMDb. He's a beast. As always, a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get the show is greatly appreciated, and if you're watching on YouTube, a thumbs up or subscribe helps us out there as well. You can learn more about the show at nosetpath.com or on Instagram at nosetpathpodcast, and you can find out more about me, your host, Drew English, at drewenglish.com or on Instagram at drewenglish with 2 H's at the end. Okay, that's it for this one. More to come in the future, and thanks for being here.